So welcome everyone to the second session in our series, Gaining Ecosystem Advantage from the London Business School. Today's session focuses on bridging the physical and digital, focusing particularly on Majid Al Futtaim's retail and real estate ecosystems in the Middle East and North Africa. My name is David Lansfield. I've designed, structured and implemented more than 15 ecosystems dating back to 1998. Can you believe it? I'm that old. This has involved work on strategy, business model design, culture and leadership, working with some amazing organizations. I'm now a strategy advisor and executive coach and a contributor to Harvard Business Review and a former senior partner in Strategy And. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Professor Michael Yacobides. Michael is a world authority, as many of you know, on ecosystems, publishing one of the most read papers in the Strategic Management Journal on ecosystems and managerial publications like HBR, Sloan Management Review, the FT and the World Economic Forum. He is a senior advisor to BCG, the consultancy, and to his company Evolution Limited, and the chief advisor on the digital economy to the Hellenic Competition Commission. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you here in our conversation series. And it's a great pleasure to be able to introduce a friend and an alumnus. So I think that I've known Ahmed for now nearly 20 years. I was a freshly minted assistant professor in LBS when I met him when he had joined London Business School after he had worked with Procter & Gamble and don't quite remember what was before or after Booz Allen, where he worked, and he did merit his distinction in the MBA way back then. And we've kept in touch, and it's been good to see him develop as the now the chief executive officer of Majid Al Futtaim Properties, that is the leading real estate operator and developer in the GCC region, UAE, Egypt, Oman, Bahrain, and Lebanon. And before that, he was doing the fun part of the ventures, the Majid Al Futtaim ventures, and doing all of the interesting stuff that engages clients in entertaining, cinemas, fashion, and such like. But more relevant to today, one of the issues that we will want to discuss is the experience that he has had in dealing with both a cyclical and a structural challenge. The structural challenge because of the growth of e-commerce that is taking some of the established giants, like those that operate malls, perhaps some of the fanciest and biggest, but also cyclical. And cyclical because it was not just the cycle of the economy, but COVID that totally shattered it. And he's done some fascinating work. He's presided over some interesting work that bridges the physical and the real, the traditional ecosystems that malls are orchestrating, all of the shop owners trying to attract the customers, moving now into the digital enablement. So it's a great pleasure to have you with us. It's been fun working with you over the years, Ahmed, and welcome to our series.
Thank you, Professor Michael, for having me, and thank you for hosting this session. I very much look forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. So today's session is one where we hope you leave with some tips, some lessons, some insights for your own role in ecosystems. And we will invite you to post questions and comments, keep them kind and clean, in the comment box, and we'll come to those as we go throughout. But perhaps we could start, Ahmed, with, let's get specific. You run a big property portfolio. I think many of us have been guests of your malls, your stores, your hotels, whether you live or work or travel to the regions you operate in. But when the pandemic hit, tell us about, your most immediate strategic, commercial and people decisions and what was going through your mind.
Well, I mean, we run a huge portfolio of real estate, but we tend to think ourselves not as a real estate business, but more of an experience company. We are in the business of what we call creating great moments for everyone every day. We do that in a variety of ways. We do that through 28 shopping malls, 16 hotels, 13 million square meters of residential communities. And obviously when the pandemic started hitting us, our business came almost to a complete halt. And I say complete with a bit of a twist, because obviously 80% of our business was shut, leisure, entertainment, travel, leisure, entertainment, shopping. But 20% of our business remained very much open to provide essential services, supermarkets,
Right.
pharmacies, other services, remittances for some of the workers in the GCC, etc. So while we had 80% shut, 20% had to work even harder, longer, and perhaps work a bit differently to be able to serve our customers and look after the safety and well-being of customers, our own talent, as well as the community at large. So we almost had to work on a dual track. And that required one very quick reallocation of priorities and resources. We've even moved almost, a couple of thousand people who used to work in our entertainment business that was completely shut to work in order fulfillment for online orders for our food retail business. We had to shift cash very quickly. We had to shift our communication style very quickly, from quarterly town halls to almost weekly dialogues with the CEO. It felt like we slept in one world and woke up in a completely different way. And the decision-making process within the organization had to change rapidly. I think there were no difficult decisions per se. I think we're a value-based organization. We're very clear about our purpose and our values. And value-based decisions came naturally to us, and we felt that most of the decisions were pretty much straightforward. But what we struggled with is the pace of decision-making, meaning there are certain decisions that we needed to make very fast, almost on the fly, and some decisions that we needed to take our time and be more deliberate about. So it's almost about think fast, think slow, decide fast, decide slow. So, preserving cash, very quick, easy decision. Over-communicating, very intuitive.
Yes.
But when it came to big financial decisions, we felt that in most instances, we should not yield to peer or external pressure to make hasty decisions. And one such big decision, perhaps we can explore later, was around extending rent relief and rent waivers for our tenants, which is quite a significant decision for a company like ours.
Terrific. I mean, that brings us to the question of the extent to which you are sharing not only the upsides, but the pain relief with some of your ecosystem participants. I want to combine that, i.e. the way that you manage your ecosystem participants, with another challenge in managing them. And I'll take us back, I think literally just a year before COVID happened. I remember we shared a stage in Dubai and we're discussing about the transformations that happen in retail and how you were trying to also work with some of the retailers and trying to convince them to go with you in the journey of transforming this experience of shopping, which is not always easy. So how did you manage the relationship with your ecosystem partners? Because you already have, the difficulty of aligning them even in good times. How does that change when the crisis erupts all of a sudden? Is it made easier? Is it made harder? And what about these structural issues of ensuring that they can follow you in whatever vision you have for how retail should look like?
I think initially it was a more difficult conversation to have, and over time the crisis has actually made some of these discussions easier. And let me explain. We think of our shopping malls not as a landlord-tenant business. We think ourselves as a platform. In fact, shopping malls arguably are the original platform business model. We build a space or a marketplace for resellers to be able to come in and transact. We bring traffic through parking structures and marketing, and we provide amenities, cool and warm air, and all of that stuff. That's pretty much a marketplace. Marketplaces, digital marketplaces, build a technology stack, onboard sellers and provide them with services like checkout, a basket, etc. The only difference between our platform and the digital ecosystem is that we are very data poor. Digital marketplaces know who's buying from what, at what time, for what price. Shopping malls are pretty much a data blind platform and has no capabilities in data and digital analytics. So what we've been focused on for a few years is trying to bridge that divide, data-wise and capability-wise, between us as a pure brick and mortar ecosystem and the digital ecosystems of digital marketplaces. And that required a number of structural changes. First, we had to consolidate all of our in-house tenants, if you will, cinema, the ski slope, our own food retail business, and our own brands, to make sure that we are able to collect all customer data, and we create what we call the golden customer record. What cheese is bought in our food retail, what cinema movies are being watched by our customers, etc. And then we went out to our tenants and said, listen, we have this fantastic data pool that we would like to cooperate on. And we need to come up with use cases where we move away. When you open a new store or launch a new collection in our malls, we offer you banners and parking advertising, to when we can offer you lookalike customers that you can personalize and target offers to. We move away from scratch and win and raffle type promotions to more personalized and targeted campaigns. And in order for us to do that, we need to exchange data. That was a very difficult conversation pre-COVID. With COVID and with the requirement for us to extend tenant relief, we actually mandated that part of the tenant relief is contingent on sharing data, cooperating on loyalty, customer insight, digital data, and analytics. Not to twist arms, but to show a clear signal to the ecosystem that this is the future of our business. What we've also done is that we started seeing that there are other partners that we never really thought of to enrich our data. Things like partners like payment gateways and banks and telcos. So pre-COVID, we used to be able to capture 25% of the transactional data in our shopping malls. With COVID, we came up to 75%. Half of the gap was bridged by data exchange and cooperation with our tenants, and half of it by partnering and cross-fertilizing data with payment gateways and banks. So essentially, we've been able in 12 months to achieve what we've struggled to achieve almost in 5 years within our ecosystem.
That's incredible. As you can see, everyone, we're warming up this conversation nicely. So please do join with your own comments and questions. We want this to be more than a three-way chat. That's an amazing story, Ahmed, in terms of that acceleration and the deal that you struck. In terms of sharing the data in that context. Tell me a bit more about the conversation then. How did you, let's get more personal, how did you prepare for such important, critical conversations when, frankly, you're dealing with operational people, other issues within and outside the ecosystem? How did you personally prepare for such it's a sophisticated conversation, right? It's an important one. How did you do it?
I think the first step was to try to deflate and divert the conversation away from rent discussion. And although we did not make any specific rent concessions at the outset, what we said is that we're suspending rent collection, full stop. Okay, so essentially, you're not paying us rent. We will figure it out in a couple of months. We're running our models. We're going to come back to you in a targeted way and figure out a win-win, solution for the rent. So take the rent or take the commercial pain out of the discussion, and then focus it really on the substance of what should we do together to even succeed on the long term. In our ecosystem, we estimate that, and I hope I get sort of the number right, we generate around some quintillion bytes of data every day, our own ecosystem, our own shopping malls, hotels, our own Carrefour outlets, cinemas, etc. That is a great asset. That is a fantastic asset. It also is a great responsibility in the context of concerns on privacy, cybersecurity, all of that. But it's a fantastic asset. And that's an asset that you can use, I would say, in a very effective way within an ecosystem and to engage in some sort of data diplomacy, offering that data for free. And not just offering the data in raw form for free, but offering that data with consumer insight, with ready-to-go use cases. But don't offer it, frankly, to everyone. I mean, we would struggle to have that conversation with many tenants for a variety of reasons. We picked less than a handful of tenants that we believe are like-minded, progressive brands and tenants that understand the future of consumer engagement, yes, omni-channel enablement, and the convergence of the digital and physical world. And we started using, data diplomacy with ready-to-go use cases to start generating value. And once we have this value, we're now having the conversation with the rest of the ecosystem to say, hey, look, that's what we've been able to achieve. That's the incremental value. And let's not squabble how to split the value now, but let's just acknowledge that there is incremental value, and we'll come to how we sort of share it at a later point. So I think this is how we approached it. And I'm hopeful that we're heading in the right direction.
I mean, that is great. And in a way, I guess that what you're doing is that you are delivering on the possibilities that a platform orchestrator such as yourself has, and in many other malls does not quite deliver, i.e. the possibility for aggregating the information, not just the demand, and also finding something that does not make sense and is impossible to do in a tenant by tenant basis, might be able to come together and create some joint value. A couple of questions on that. One is a little bit more tricky and sensitive one, which is that most organizations tend to be very protective, though, in anything that relates to data and knowledge of customers. So, relating back to what David was saying, I'm just wondering, how do you overcome this resistance? Because I can certainly see what value there is. I'm just thinking that quite often people tend to be a little bit more parochial, and there needs to be an education, precisely because in all of these digital ecosystem players, we have totally considered normal that we will not only sign all the data off to them, they will make money from them, they will target their offerings, and we're going to be fine. Now, on the other hand, when we see other companies that are not part of the big tech firms, like, ooh, we wouldn't want that to happen now, would we? And there's a very interesting dynamic there in terms of the way that we approach that. And, you did something which is fairly brave, saying, well, hang on a minute, we may be able to still deliver some of this value. How were you able to manage this tension? And what do you think about this, gap that exists between, the license that we societally give to big tech and anything they can do with data, which is fine, as opposed to what you see here, regulatory pushbacks notwithstanding?
Well, the short answer is with great difficulty, as you could imagine, to strike that balance. Big tech for us as a real estate company that thinks of itself as an experience provider is both an inspiration and a competitive. Big tech is an inspiration in terms of their management, I would say, innovation, agile methods, squads and sprints. And we're trying to learn from that in our own business and certainly in our own digital offers. They are also a source of inspiration for, their ability to monetize and manage data. But they're also competitors. And we are competing with big tech for share of wallet, share of mind, and share of heart across all of our business. And we realize that we cannot do that alone without our partners in the ecosystem. One thing we've tried to do in one particular segment of our ecosystem, the luxury segment, which is probably the most difficult to crack in terms of cooperating on customer data, because luxury brands are super protective of their customers, as well as, do not believe that there is any, until recently at least, do not believe any crossover exists between a luxury customer and a fast fashion. What we've been able to do is run use cases that does not depend on exchanging data, but generate value for the luxury. So for instance, through our golden customer record and our loyalty program, we're now able to identify luxury customers and would-be luxury customers, and we offer them free premium reserved parking that essentially, barriers open up you as you drive through the mall to a particular parking spot, and then we're able to track their spend across luxury brands as a result. And then we go back to the luxury retailers and play that back to them, saying, listen, you think you know your customer. Well, I can tell you that, you are luxury brand A, but actually your share of wallet, if you consider luxury group B and luxury group C, is 10%. You think you're doing a great job. And here's the data that supports it. And I have that data and I'm willing to, in a way, give it away today for free in exchange for us cooperating on co-marketing, on loyalty, on payments, on making the customer experience more effortless across the board. Because one thing in our digital ecosystem that's a big challenge, our physical ecosystem compared to digital ecosystem, the digital ecosystem experience is very smooth end-to-end. When you go on any digital platform, it's a very smooth. In the physical world, you're being handed over from mall to tenant to the parking operator. So the way for us to make that as effortless and seamless as possible is to be able to share data, to be able to cooperate on payments and loyalty to make that experience as seamless as possible. And hopefully, we are going to be launching a very exciting product in a couple of months that we call the one-click or all-in-one sort of payment that allows you with one click, whether you're paying with Apple Pay or Samsung Pay or what have you, pay at any tenant in any of our malls, automatically earn or burn points. The data respecting all privacy laws, etc., is exchanged between different players in the ecosystem, and then that makes the experience comparable to what you get on an Amazon, for instance, where you don't feel that you're moving from one seller to another.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm breathless listening to this in terms of the amount and the scope and the dynamism of your portfolio, Ahmed. I think you've covered, tell me otherwise, Muna, the question about customer data privacy. I think you've covered that in some depth. Tell me, Muna, who raised the comment if you want anything more. Edward Clayton, familiar name. Edward, you've asked a question about what major business model shifts are you anticipating as a result of the collision of COVID, digitalization and demographic culture shifts. So there's a big picture question for you and I want to then come back to you on a question of innovation in a moment.
I mean, the name Edward Clayton does sound familiar. I think Edward and I are ex-colleagues from Booz Allen, perhaps, if I'm not mistaken. So there are many profound and somewhat unpredictable shifts that we're seeing. But there are also shifts that you can push. One big, I would say, transformational shift in the commercial real estate business model, specifically for shopping malls, centers around the rent relationship and the estimated rent value. How do you calculate rent for a shop at the most basic level?
Yes.
Classically, and for 100 years, it was location and sales. Good location, premium rent, high sales, even more rent. With the transformation that we're seeing in customer behavior and the opportunity that we see with digital data and analytics across our ecosystem, the store value, in our opinion, will no longer be driven entirely by how much sales you generate within the four walls of a store. It will have different components that go into rent computation. One of it is certainly sales within the store, but a large part of the value of the store is around customer engagement, the experience that you provide. And on that note, by the way, we're seeing a trend for what we call highly experiential tenants to take on actually more space rather than less space in our malls. This is happening as we speak. More showrooming, more opportunity to tell the story, etc. And the third and growing component is the halo effect of the store on omni-channel and e-commerce sales. And we now know from our own data and third-party data that when you open a physical store in a particular catchment area, e-commerce sales automatically grow up. When you close that store, e-commerce sales go down. That there is a inverse proportion relationship between your proximity to the store and e-commerce sales. The further away you are from the nearest physical store, the less. Now, this is difficult to quantify unless the ecosystem has very clear, mechanism for data exchange and a new rent formula that emerged that captures the value of the store beyond sales within the four walls.
This is fascinating because I think that what you're saying is that we are seeing a transformation at two levels. One of them is a transformation of retail. And some of the things that you're suggesting are how does retail change? And the second, which is the interesting corollary, is that there is now a stronger role for the local orchestrator, such as the mall operator. Because some of the benefits that you discuss are rather difficult to be achieved in more diffuse areas. Perhaps even those who manage particular areas, particular parts of the city may have a new challenge ahead of them. But what you are trying to do is use your role within one mall to help usher in the new reality of what makes sense for the customer and how as a result, we are rethinking the relationship between you as the orchestrator and the manager of the platform and these participants. Now, that means that there's going to be quite a bit of work, especially for those who own and operate malls, because they need to think about more than just prestige and development and finance and high rents, which traditionally, with no disrespect to how hard all these things were the things that were driving the business. And now you're saying, no, we have this other component. So this is probably the thing that is least understood by people on the outside. And I know that you have been in the forefront of thinking about both what are the changes in terms of the retail, and also how on earth can we catalyze this in order to make it more attractive, and frankly make our malls more attractive, because they're part of these changes. So let me dive into some of the details, and let me ask you about some of the things that hold them together. And here in your case, the part of that is the data proposition, which of course requires a lot of hard selling. The other thing that you mentioned that I would like to ask you to give us a bit more information about, because I think it's another really interesting component to what you guys do, has to do with the loyalty program or anything else that essentially gives the mall level perspective, which makes it attractive for the customer to come in, but still enables the tenants to say, okay, and I see why this is good for me, rather than why this is sort of stealing part of the relationship that I have, which is the thing that all retailers or customer facing companies care about. How do you manage that? Can you just give us a very quick overview of how this is run, how this is managed from your perspective?
So our first, I would say, entry point in some of these explorations with our partners is around shifting their mindset around our value proposition. Our value proposition is no longer good, well-merchandised space that's easily accessible, clean, friendly, and secure. Our future value proposition is actually about providing them with a suite of software tools, consumer insight tools, customer engagement tools, personalized marketing, and so on, and omni-channel enablement. And these three value propositions collectively is what the future of commercial real estate is all about. And real estate owners who can't see it or can't afford to invest in it will fall behind, and you would see very rapid consolidation in the sector, we believe, as a result. One way to bring this value proposition to life are some physical changes that we're making to the property. For instance, the location, the size, and the accessibility of storerooms to enable omni-channel enablement and delivery from our properties to make it as fast and as seamless as possible, especially for our properties that are smack in the middle of very affluent city center locations across the Middle East. In some instances, about recutting stores. So the front half of the store is a traditional store, and the back half of the store is actually a dark kitchen or a dark store that acts as a micro-fulfillment center. And I think they trend towards micro-fulfillment rather than large out-of-town locations as people demand more and more hyper-delivery, hyper-grocery services. So there is a physical element. But the other element is how do you tie it all together from a customer perspective? And here the customer is not the tenant, but actually the end consumer. And during the pandemic, we made very clear that we need to stay in touch with all of our consumers, even if we're offering them zero services. You know, our moviegoer customers, for instance, we offer free popcorn on Deliveroo, even if they're watching Netflix, just to keep the emotional connection. Drive-in, cinemas at the roof top of our parking structure. But one meaningful way to keep the connection with the customer is a loyalty program that essentially acts as not a loyalty program per se, but a digital companion that allows you to earn, burn, browse offers, etc., across all of our malls, all of our hotels, all of our retail outlets, as well as third-party. So sort of over-the-top digital lifestyle companion that you carry in your pocket. You can pay using that app, you can earn points, burn points, reserve a car parking spot, browse offers in the mall, chat live with some of the tenants who are now live on our personal shopper, book a haircut in our concept store. So it becomes more of a lifestyle company. And in doing so, we are relevant to the customer, and the customer is willing to share their data. Otherwise, why would they share their data? I mean, with iOS 14 now, many customers are opting out of sharing data across apps because they don't see value. The problem is not, iOS 14. The problem is, the data was being used, lucratively so, but the customers didn't see value. So we're very keen that we give as much value back to our customers in terms of personalized target offers, freebies, cashback, different things that different customers value differently, but remain relevant through that loyalty program. And that loyalty program is an over-the-top loyalty program. So if any of our tenants want to run their own loyalty program, it doesn't conflict with it at all. It's actually an added layer. As I said, we see it as a digital lifestyle companion to all of our customers.
You've described yourself. We're going to have a bit of a quick fire round, Ahmed. We've got lots of questions coming in, so we're going to run through some of those questions. And no particular order, so forgive me, audience, if I go to different places. You describe yourself as an experienced organization. Obviously, you're real estate. You sound like a technology company as well. Are you a tech company? That's one of the questions. Short, sharp answer, yes or no?
We're not a tech company. We are an experience company.
With technology capabilities, I guess. The one thing I'd say is a question from me. You've talked a lot about how, as an orchestrator, you've pioneered innovation in difficult times, and I have to say it's a very impressive story. How do you encourage others, whether it's tenants or others, to innovate? If you like, how do you create the conditions for them to innovate, if you like, as opposed to you driving the innovation? What sort of things do you try and do, whether it could be new entrants or existing tenants? What sort of things do you do? So it's not all about you.
Yeah, I mean, it starts, at the very start of any relationship with any tenant. It starts with really selecting the right tenants or the right partners for our ecosystem. Unlike a digital ecosystem or a digital marketplace, we don't have infinite inventory. I mean, we have very finite inventory. And we do track at a very granular level what we call the brand performance index or the experience quotient of all tenants. And we make sure that we continue to co-invest, upsize and reward tenants that offer great experience and actively take off our ecosystem poor customer service or poor experience tenants. So I think that's a fundamental point. And classically, this is around merchandise mix that you have to do. And sometimes you sacrifice short-term rent in return for long-term sustainability and customer experience.
Let me go from the inspirational to the slightly more prosaic. Julia Namuni asks, how do you square the fact that you need to invest in technology and data sharing and more experience, the fact that retailers have less money available to pay for these services? Do you have to accept lower returns long term?
Well, not all retailers are created equal. Let me put it this way.
Great answer.
So the self-selection you were speaking about is not only on the attributes vis-a-vis the customer, but you think that there is some potential of the right selection in terms of their ability to cover their space rent and your technology costs.
So more specific, there is obviously a bit of like a COVID roulette. If you sell ties and shirts, you probably haven't done well last year. If you sell yoga pants and loungewear, you've done very well. But if you look at the results of the earning releases of many of the retail companies, the high customer experience retailers who themselves have invested in technology are doing super well. I mean, all the luxury brands are having record years. One brand that we're familiar with because we represent that brand in the region, Lululemon, has had a record year. It's now a $50 billion dollar cap company. So certainly there are big winners and big losers in the retail space. And what we're seeing is that the big winners are big winners for a reason. And these very same reasons of investing in digital experience, et cetera, make them better partners for our ecosystem.
Terrific. Let me just ask now, as a matter of time, because we don't have much left, to see what our audience thinks about some questions. So we're going to have some polls. Can we have the polls launched? Because I would love to have your views on some questions that we're asking the audience. Let's launch them one by one. Could we open poll 1, please? So the first one is, who should take the hit in the ecosystem when there's a downturn in business? And it's what the audience now thinks. So please vote. And hopefully you voted. Let's see what the results are. We'll have all three of them, Ahmed, and then we'll have your views in more than one. Could we see the results of the poll, please? It should be shared amongst ecosystem participants, but huge majority here. And interestingly, much less about ecosystem participants who have not performed well. There is quite a bit of procedural justice. Terrific. Let's go to the second poll, which is not about sharing, but about the total value creation. Let's launch our second poll now. Who will win in this mixed world? Is going to be the traditionally physically based firms that reinvent themselves? Is it the players that master the delivery of hybrid models? Or is it the fact that whatever we do, the digital stalwarts are unstoppable? Please vote and let's see the results. So interesting. I think that's probably good news for you, Ahmed, but we'll let you have a view on the 75-25 vote for the last two options. And let's launch the third poll. Okay, so what do you think are the main issues in building ecosystems? And here we are asking you to make more than one choice, because you're probably in this session because you're concerned about it. And we want to ask you what you think the main issues are. And here is where I would love perhaps more than just your assessment of what people say, Ahmed. Is it getting customer buy-in? Is it getting complementers buy-in? Is it getting the technology interface and the user experience right? Isn't it getting the data strategy right? Or is it just getting my colleagues to understand that what this thing means, and that it matters for those of you who don't have the luxury of leading an organization? Vote away and think what matters. It'll be interesting to see what you think makes a difference. And now let's watch the results. Let's see what people are saying. Really interesting. Really interesting. If you get the technology interface and UX right, and if you get the data strategy right, I think the message is you can get the customer buy-in, the complementer buy-in, and people are a little more relaxed about making sure that the case for change is made, because presumably if you are not blind, you can see it, which is not always the case, I would say, but perhaps we're not a representative sample that is voting here right now. Ahmed, what do you make of what the audience thinks?
So I can't see the poll results anymore, but perhaps reflect on the last one on what really matters. I think in the case of classic physical ecosystems like ours that are trying to transform and bridge the physical and digital worlds, it's really getting the buy-in from inside the organization. And this is a classic innovator's dilemma. When business is okay, declining in parts but growing in others, it's very difficult to get certainly colleagues who've grown in a certain mindset and a certain industry framework to break that frame and start thinking about digital data. And so in our experience, changing the mindset of the leadership of the organization, building new capabilities and delivering new muscles has been the biggest challenge. On the question of who bears the pain, in our experience over the past 18 months, and I'm reminded by that now seemingly distant announcement, put on your face mask on first before, so helping yourself before helping others. You have to be able to breathe before you reach out and help your travel companions. We're very fortunate to be a very strong company financially with a solid balance sheet and investment grade rating, access to the global debt capital markets. And one of our very early and quick actions was to make sure we preserve that, not just out of self-interest, which is very important. And I'm glad that we're now out of it. We're the only real estate company in the region that hasn't had any rating action. We're probably one of the few real estate operators in the world that haven't had any rating action. We maintained our credit rating. But also knowing that if we're not strong enough, we're not going to be able to support our ecosystem to weather the storm and then come out of it in a more sustainable fashion. So I think it's also a matter of affordability, who can afford, who has the biggest vested interest to emerge differently and hopefully stronger out of the slump. And three, good old, balance of power in negotiation. We think about everything we're doing in our ecosystem, not in terms of one asset, but across a network of 28 assets across the region, and how this network would provide a very different value proposition to any global brand versus a one asset or a two asset commercial real estate company.
One thing that's striking amongst this, what you said there, Ahmed, is, and you're placing some long-term bets, aren't you? I mean, you have some long-term, developments in Saudi, the Mall of Saudi, obviously contributing to Vision 2030. So we talked about the weathering the storm in the short term and the innovation that you've accelerated, but you are still investing in 5, 10, 15, 20-year projects at the same time. Yes, you have a strong balance sheet, but how did you hold your nerve on those sorts of projects at a time when perhaps business wasn't quite as strong in the short term?
So I'm reminded, I think, by one of the classes I had in LBS around the prisoner of war mentality. It felt almost like one was a prisoner of war in his own house while working from home for such an extended period of time. And I think it's balancing having faith that you will eventually come out of it in decent shape, but at the same time being realistic enough to deal with the brutal reality and the brutal facts. I think it's called the Stockdale dilemma or paradox. And it's proven to be that dual mentality that has helped many prisoners of wars in Vietnam and elsewhere to be able to survive and actually rejoin life after the release from captivity. So I feel this is probably the one lesson that has served me well, remaining fairly optimistic that we will somehow find a way, but at the same time dealing with the brutal facts as they come, sharing them with the team, sharing them with the wider organization, and being humble enough to admit along the way that none of us have all the answers. And we have to admit that moving forward, there's still plenty of uncertainty around variance and long-term impact on customer behavior, economies, etc., inflation. There are plenty of uncertainty and ambiguity out there.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Michael, any final remarks?
I was just wanted to very quickly reflect on the fact that earlier on, one of the questions was, how will you be doing that and being able to make the returns? And I think that the proof in the pudding is that the bet that you have taken is that in order to be successful in operating the malls, you need to focus on the experience in terms of the customer and making it as seamless and in a way equivalent to what we are being spoiled to learn in the digital world, but also to ensuring that you don't only think about the physical with a bit of an afterthought of the digital, but linking the physical and the digital in being able to ensure that not only the overall experience is attractive, but that you as a mall operator can become more interesting and at the end of the day, more appreciated even from the financial community. And I would say that that probably has not come that easy. And again, I'm going back to the pre-crisis discussions that I recall us having about needing to convince people of the need to undertake this investment. Any thoughts for the people that are in the process of trying to change the mentality in their organizations or change the view of their peers, making them think about how they can find both the words and the emotive ability of convincing how to change the paradigm?
You're on mute, Ahmed.
Yes.
Sorry. I'm perhaps reminded here, Michael, with what Rumi said, a few centuries ago. Yesterday, I was smart and I wanted to change the world. Today, I'm wise and I want to change myself. I think we often emphasize or overestimate the need to change others versus the need to work on ourselves and lead ourselves and change the way we look at things and change the way we act without us demonstrating a different mindset, leading sometimes by example, and making small sacrifices along the way, perhaps showing some vulnerability as well, it's very difficult to change the world. I mean, it all starts with changing ourselves as leaders, and that is, for me, perhaps something that has stuck with me over the years. I know it's a bit philosophical, but that's something that I've always kept with me.
Not only the terrific way of closing the session, it's also the perfect segue to what we will be doing in 3 weeks from now, which is speaking about changing the world and thinking about all the regulatory backlash against big tech, another fun adventure that some of us has been involved in with Cristina Cafara, one of the leading practitioners on that in Europe. But for me, Ahmed, it's been a pleasure, as always, to have you join us. And I look forward to more such sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael.
It was a refreshing to see somebody with such commercial acumen, with a sense of humanity and a clarity of how you've explained how you make decisions at critical times. I know it'll be considerable use for other people involved in ecosystems. So thank you. All the links are in the chat in terms of signing up to the next session. The recording will be available, and do give us any feedback on what we can do in future sessions. But Ahmed, Michael, what a wonderful conversation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you.